an honor to introduce you to our very first speaker of the Expo. He is a metaphysical scholar and teacher, and he's the creator of the popular YouTube channel Spirit Science. When he experienced a spiritual awakening at age 19, he realized that the world would be changed nearly overnight if society knew all that he was learning, feeling, and deeply knowing to be true. So he merged his childhood passion of animating cartoon characters and his newfound love of metaphysical topics and created the YouTube channel that has a heartfelt, rabid following with nearly 1 million subscribers and counting. Today, he'll be sharing his perspective of what a 5D society could possibly look like and how we can get there, starting with you, the viewer. Here to deliver our first ever keynote presentation, Jordan River. Jordan, welcome.
Thank you so much for having me.
Absolutely. We're so looking forward to it, and we'll let you take it away.
Perfect. So I'm just going to press this share screen button here, and hopefully this whole thing works. We haven't tried it yet. Sharing everything. All right, you can see my window. Everything looks good. Oh, we've got like a vortex. That's cool. All right. Imagining a 5D society. It's a very fitting topic and subject for this expo today. Now, imagining the new Earth, as we're getting into this, we're not the first to speak on this, right? Going back through countless generations, we find this has been described in ancient texts and philosophies and spiritualities and religions, the golden age, the new Earth, the Tao, nirvana, the promised land, the kingdom of God or heaven on earth, sometimes even the event, right? There's so many different names, words, ideas that have been shared and passed along as though this is this most definitely happening, this reality that we're all moving into together. But even as it's been discussed for so long, it's like this is going to take some time. This is even described in the Hindu and the Eastern philosophies of the yugas, that we've moved through these epochs of time, moving through all of this density, moving back into what can only be described as the golden age. And to really discuss what it could look like to imagine and cultivate and create a new Earth or a 5D society, it would probably be very valuable to begin by starting with life, death, life cycles. You see, death is often something seen as feared by humans. It's not uncommon to see that there's a fear of death among humanity and society, something that should be avoided or not even really looked at all. And the thing that is very much just, I guess, missed in that avoidance is that, yes, while death can be scary, it's the nourishing force that brings about life renewed. One example of this, actually, and as we were, as Zane had mentioned, the forest fires in California, or just the fires around the world that have happened over the last year. We had Australia at the beginning of this year. Is that even though an intense fire can be very, very destructive, just this raw, intense, chaotic burning, all of the ashes from all of the burning actually creates a foundation of almost like topsoil. The ash sits on the surface of the earth, and that provides nourishing energy, nourishing substance for the new life to spring up with its vibrance renewed. That's what I'm trying to say. So while it can be scary, we have to see that both in nature and even with us, it is a nourishing force that brings about life renewed. If we look at even from the perspective of reincarnation, when our bodies get old, when we die, perhaps that passage can be a scary one, But then bada bing, look, you've got a new body, and it's all young and spry and excited and, you know, renewed. It's a beautiful thing. So death, the life cycle, is a very important one to understand and to not be afraid of as we move from an old way of being in society to a new one. Now, it is actually believed in some tribes too that it is Lady Death herself who causes the infant to turn upside down in the womb. And so by its nature, death prepares the way to rebirth. And as it said in the beautiful movie, The Fountain, death is the road to awe. And so this applies on every level of life. This applies for us personally as we go through our own ego deaths. It applies in society. It applies in nature. And as mentioned, it applies really at this highest level of shifting from one level of consciousness to the other. We have to be willing to let our old way of thinking, our old habits, our old ideas pass on, because that makes room, that energy, that mindset, the old way of thinking about the world actually paves the way for something new. So this shift is happening right now. It's been going on for a long time and accelerating more so, especially even just in the last 10 years, really. And with the advent of modern internet technology and communications tech and everything that has been really emerging and developing, things are accelerating at a rapid, tremendously fast-moving rate. And what steps can we take, each of us here and now in our day-to-day lives, playing a role in the realization of new Earth systems? So to begin, or to continue, I suppose we've already begun, what is a dimension, right? We're talking about like moving into a 5D society, and what about a 4D society? And like, what even is 5D? What are these words that we're talking about? Because there is a difference between scientifically or mathematically speaking in the subject of dimensions and spiritually speaking what a dimension could possibly be. So scientifically speaking, a dimension is considered a measurable extent of some kind, such as length, breadth, depth, or height, or an aspect or feature of a situation, problem, or thing. Mathematically and spiritually are generally two different things. And today we're still striving to find how they interconnect. Because spiritually speaking, dimensions often relate with planes of existence, or even different realms, right? Different places, a different way that reality can appear outside of that which we can perceive. It's believed that we are right now in the fourth dimension, a transitory period between our old world, the third dimension, and a higher reality, the 5D, right? And of course, there's many different beliefs and ideas about this. Some people say we're still in 3D and 4D is a passing through. And there's, again, yes, many different ways of looking at this. And because it's very elusive, and because we don't have like such a solid scientific understanding of different dimensions and planes of existence sort of thing, it's not very easy to pin it down specifically. So we have to be willing, and yes, we have to be willing to explore the different ideas to try and find the most solid and tangible understanding that we possibly can. You know, is there any substance here, or is it just New Age jargon? And one of the things that does lend itself to merging this scientific and spiritual understanding of this actually is well, it is a common idea in mathematics and in the fields of science. And I can probably point to Neil deGrasse Tyson, who gave a workshop at one point and shared that, you know, if it's kind of like the way that we look at flatland, you know, if there was a two-dimensional world and you passed your finger through that world, the little two-dimensional creatures would be like, whoa, what is happening? There's this, like, you know, a 2D shape, like, you know, starting with a point, the tip of your finger that expands as it goes into it, and, you know, gets bigger, and then it as you pull your finger out, it shrinks down back to the dot and disappears. And so a fourth dimensional being or a fifth dimensional being, if they were to pass their finger through the third dimensional reality that we experience here and now, then we might experience, like a third dimensional object coming into being, but it's only, we're so limited in our perspective, we can't even see the totality of the whole finger that it is that they're pushing through in this, into this dimension. And so, the final thing I just want to share here briefly too is that speaking to this transitory, 3D to 5D sort of thing, there is a concept that, it's like we used to be in this very fixed, rigid three-dimensional world, and that there was a shift that was supposed to take place where we would have moved into a 4D, like a going through a dimensional shift of some kind. This is like a concept that actually goes back through many ancient Native American traditions and the Mayans as well. But the thing is that we as a species, as a planet, we're not ready to fully engage with becoming sort of semi-physical, right? These like sort of still having bodies, but having the ability to shape reality in a more instant thought, directly creating your reality kind of way. And so because of that, there's an idea that we actually emerged into sort of a temporal 4D reality that's based on still the third dimensional laws of physics, and that we right now have the opportunity and the ability to rapidly shift our consciousness into a higher reality. But we also can stay in a more 3D mindset and state of being for those who are, not as far along on the path. So with all of that in mind, again, is there any substance here, or is it just New Age jargon? And this is the question that we're going to explore here. Now, the fourth dimension is often equated to time in a mathematics or science-based perspective. How something changes in X, Y, Z, but over the duration of time. And if this is the case, how might we see ourselves in 4D as it relates to the dimension of time? One way is through mystical experiences, for example, meditation, breath work, or plant medicine like ayahuasca, in which we create powerful healing beyond the present moment, shaping and reframing our past, present, and future. It's a very interesting subject because for anyone who has done serious meditation work or breath work or even plant medicine, it's not uncommon to experience your consciousness sort of spanning back through the totality of your life, past, present, future, and seeing them all weave together in this beautiful continuum. And this might be what we're speaking about, right? As far as imagining a 4D or a 5D society moving into this higher reality may be simply that, yes, well, we remain physical here, but our consciousness is more able to experience beyond the limits of just a third dimensional awareness. And perhaps it's easier to do this now that it has been in the past. A reality that less people had access to is now becoming available within mass consciousness. So it's like with this whole, shifting of energy, shifting of consciousness, shifting of time, as we evolve as a species, perhaps more people now have access to do this, expanding in a metaphysical kind of way, where before we were more limited in focus and scope of as to what our lives could possibly be. And the last point here is also kind of similar to what I described previously, but just as a species, we're collectively seemingly becoming more aware of how our past and future are a continuum of experience and flow, and us becoming more aware of the intricate connections within us through time and space, not just to ourselves, our actions, past, present, and future, but also our connections to each other, past, present, and future, and how our thoughts and feelings can affect each other through time and space. And it probably can sound a little bit really out there for certain. I would actually probably I would like to reference I think they're called the Quantum Gravity Institute. And they have provided some very remarkable new information to show that on a quantum level, the particles and bits of information that are making up all of reality are actually moving forwards and backwards in time simultaneously. And that even though we experience a linear progression through our, through in life through time, experiencing one day at a time, kind of every second, it's always moving forward. Things are in the past, they're always in the past. But the particles that make up everything don't operate like that. They can be in the past and the future, forwards and backwards, time and space, just all over the place. And if part of the fabric of reality can move and act and behave in this way, the question arises, can we also tap into that? Can we affect the past or completely transform the future with a deep enough connection to the present moment and the eternal now? Another quick way of describing this, I might just say, is like imagining it as a wheel of time. Imagining that, as the wheel of time just keeps turning, but that from the center of that wheel, there is a stillness and the ability to connect out to all the different spokes on the wheel at any given point, at any given moment. And so it's through your consciousness that you can actually connect with the past, with the future. You can and see potential realities of where that wheel is going, where the car of the wheel of time is steering. So if that's the fourth dimension, let's look at the fifth dimension now. Often it's described that the fifth dimension is essentially a non-physical reality. Like if we were fifth dimensional beings and not also rooted in the third dimension, we were just fifth dimensional beings, we would be omnipresent through time and space and entirely formless, a non-physical state of consciousness. Now, that is one common idea of 5D. Many others, however, believe that it's simply a state of mind or consciousness, right? It's like, well, we are rooted in 3D, but our consciousness extends into 5D. And that's a state where we are more aware of the inherent unity between us, more connected mentally and emotionally with each other in the world. The majority of these explanations, again, are not always deeply scientific, mostly because we don't have the tools necessary scientifically. We have not pioneered those tools to be able to actively grasp and fully conceptualize what that means. But the ideas are deeply imaginative and are very based in spiritual awareness. So again, if you were to take a plant medicine experience, go to Costa Rica or the Central South America and do an ayahuasca ceremony of some kind and asked, what is 5D? You might, emerge into this sort of multidimensional, formless reality of beyond time and space and be like, wow, that you have this sense of knowing inside of yourself as to what that is specifically. But we still don't have the scientific tools to be able to measure what that experience was and if it was exclusive to you or how it might be, made more accessible to everyone, how it's replicatable. But since we are imagining a 5D society, where will our imagination allow us to go in the process of global change? So let's ground it in a little bit, right? We've talked about some really big ideas here. Perhaps it's possible that we can shift entirely into a new reality through a dimensional shift, as mentioned before. And perhaps we're a long ways away from this. The idea of a dimensional shift is a very rapid global shift from one density, one state of consciousness, one state of existence into another. And the idea is that in order for us to be able to do that, we have to be consciously prepared as masters and creators of our reality in order to do that. So maybe that's a thing, maybe it's not. It's not entirely known yet. But we must be mindful that to really create lasting change, we must take the higher worlds that we are imagining and bring them into the world and make them physically real, right? In this way, like we are the creators of our reality, and imagination is really our biggest limitation. Is when you go about your day-to-day life and you live a mundane existence. Not saying anyone here watching this in particular lives a mundane existence, but we as a collective species often subscribe to a more mundane perspective of the world, and in doing so, that is the reality that we create. So by using our imagination, we're able to merge the higher dimensions with the tangibility of our physical existence. And then in doing so, increase the resonance and quality of our physical experiences here, right? It's taking that large, expansive dreams of possibilities and bringing them into the world and increasing how good life can be for everyone by fundamentally living from a higher state of consciousness. But the problem is, or the challenge here, is that often when, thinking of on a more spiritual perspective, we focus on our higher centers. It's a very popular thing, even in New Age circles, to be like, well, I really want to open my crown chakra. I want to activate my third eye. I want to be in the heart. I want to, really round out that throat chakra and really expand into it, right? And those are the ones that get all the focus. So what happens when we forsake the lower centers? It's like, yes, maybe we have this, higher awareness, but in terms of like dealing with, more root level, lower center issues, those become a little bit degraded because we're not putting enough balance and focus into harmonizing those as well and bringing that higher awareness down into the physical, saying, what do we need right here and right now? Now, this is one of my favorite quotes from someone who I would consider to be one of my greatest and favorite astrological teachers, Caroline Casey. And she says, imagination lays the tracks for the reality train to follow. It's so fun. It's such a fun, and yes, just yes. So let's imagine some realities for a moment. Could a 5D reality look like this? And maybe, right? I mean, this is very like non-physical kind of experience, very deeply connected, but the person's still there, still physically there, but the astral body is like fully activated, higher Merkaba, 100%. How about this? Maybe this could be the result of a 5D society. If everyone was living really in their higher heart and deeply connected to the limitless possibilities of our imagination, maybe we could all be living in beautiful, futuristic ocean cities and flying cities, and maybe even, if the imagination is laying the tracks for the reality train, I wonder why not make like a big city that looks like Gondor from Lord of the Rings, right? Like that was a beautiful city, and that would be so cool. Like we could definitely do it if we just took that imagination and put it into physical action, right? But maybe a 5D society, maybe it's like this, maybe it's a spacefaring civilization. Maybe it's that we're exploring the universe and we're actively pioneering across the multidimensional space and looking for new worlds that have different kinds of, all kinds of different foods and different animals and creatures, and maybe even meeting other civilizations. Or maybe it's as simple as this. Maybe it's something that is just like a little bit of modern technology, even just as it is, merged a little bit more with nature and a little bit more connected to the earth itself. Now, we're higher. This is great. We have a job to do right here and now. We are the ones, all of us here together, are the ones who have to build this new earth, and to build the new earth with our imagination and lay the tracks for it to physically come into existence, right? None of these beautiful ideas and images here could ever come into being if no one had the thought, gee, let's do that, right? And some of these may even be, in our immediate future. Others may be a little bit farther off. It really depends on us. And the question is now, where does one begin? Mentally, emotionally, technologically, spiritually, right? Physically? And the answer, as you might expect, is yes. Because of the infinite and expansive nature of reality, we can begin to engage with this higher reality in a number of ways. And the importance is that we do engage. We have to be consciously participating with our lives and the world actively every moment, every day. Every energetic ripple and change that we make within ourselves, perceiving and living in higher reality for ourselves, helps the world around us to move there as well. And this is something that, like, I think we often maybe miss in that awareness of how deeply connected that we are. But literally, as you grow as a person, as you evolve your own consciousness, and you shine that light out into the world, other people feel it, and this applies. It doesn't matter if you have if you know 3 people, or if you're a super famous celebrity, and everywhere in between. Is as you make changes and you just become an expression of that naturally in your life, people around you will take notice. They'll feel that. It's why you often hear, like, it's like a smile goes such a long way when you're walking down the road and you just smile to someone. Like, that moment of present awareness can instantly change the quality of that other person's day, because maybe they were feeling so completely unacknowledged and you gave them some hope in the world, right? And so it's very important that we do this work for ourselves, but we also are doing it for each other, because we're all in this together. And it's important that we not just, this is more of the same, but we're not just working on our dreams outwardly, but we do the work inwardly as well. It's like, building the ocean city idea is a really beautiful idea. We definitely want to get there, but if we're not operating with a really integrated awareness, mind, body, and soul, really connected to our own higher selves, to our own, spiritual guidance, then we may end up making a lot of mistakes that we might not have made if we were more deeply in tune. And so we must be working outwardly and inwardly. And there's this idea as well that says that we are not the outside or the inside, the outside or the inside of ourselves, of our existence. We are the awareness of both. We are that boundary line of energy and information that comes in and goes out and comes in and goes out. And we're aware of it, and we choose how we receive it, and we choose how we put it back out. But we're not, if we were to identify ourselves, not to identify with what is within or with what is without, because all of that is subject to change. We are just the awareness of the passing through. Now, the last thing here too is that, again, just speaking to how to make this go a lot smoother, is that when we work through our karma, the energy can flow a lot smoother. And that's really important. Important to know, and important to realize that you can't just jump straight in and go all the way to 10. You got to work your way up there. But as you begin to do that work, it becomes easier and easier as you go. So the holographic reality. Now, this is really fun, right? There's many prominent theories in modern science today suggesting that our reality is a hologram or a simulation of some kind, right? Like much like a very expansive video game. You've probably seen or heard of many of those very big video games, like Grand Theft Auto or Red Dead Redemption or whatever, right? Where there's these like massive worlds. Like the amount of time it would take in the game to walk from one side of the map to the other side would be like hours and hours and hours. So it's like that times a cajillion infinity because the entire universe is all just potentially a big holographic simulated reality video game, and that your body, this body, is the main character of the game, right? And that's a really fun idea. It makes life, it takes life out of the idea of something mundane and into something that's like, whoa, like let's go on an adventure, right? And as above, so below. It, you know, the meaning behind this kind of classic ancient hermetic principle is that our experiences represent something in another dimension, frequency, or realm. And so if this physical reality is a hologram or a simulation, what it would describe is that all of the actions that are taken in this dimension, all of the things that happen here and now, are all a result of other things happening in other frequencies, dimensions, or realms. And a very simple way of describing that is actually just looking at it in terms of thought and emotion. Like, if you consider any action that you've ever taken in your life, even as much as just like reaching over and grabbing a glass of water and drinking it and putting it down, it doesn't just happen arbitrarily. Those actions were taken because I had the thought to do that, or you had the thought to do that, or the feeling, the emotional impulse to take some action. And so thoughts and feelings are non-physical. They're invisible forces. They're invisible experiences within you. You know, point to where are your emotions, and you could kind of point all over the place. Maybe your belly, you're feeling it in your body, feeling it in your head, you're swirling around, right? But it's not like a you know, just something as tangible as like point to your hand. It's right here, right? It's a little, it's less elusive. So, or it's rather, the hand is less elusive. The thoughts and feelings are more elusive. But the point being that your actions and everything that happens here in the physical reality is a result of non-physical stimulations. And so these equate to layers and layers of reality upon each other, varying in density and vibration. We must learn to see beyond the limited scope of only our three-dimensional awareness. This is one of the earliest teachings in the Tree of Life, and the concepts of the Tree of Life, which is that at the very base level of the Tree of Life is the physical reality. The sphere is called Malkut, except it says that Malkut is basically just inert matter. It's like the body without a soul, without an energy or vibration that's stimulating it, is just dirt on the ground, right? But it's because of Yesod, which is the sphere right above it, that actually creates an energetic stimulus, a spiritual, a vibratory stimulus that facilitates this physical reality to move. And so Yesod would ultimately be described kind of like an astral realm, like your astral body, or your spiritual body, your soul, that ultimately, you know, is the accumulation of your thoughts and your feelings and all of these other forces. The Tree of Life is a very elaborate conversation, so we won't get super much deeper into that. But basically, it's describing that your astral body, your soul, your thoughts, and your emotions all kind of come together to create a thick blanket of energy that stimulates the physical reality. And that is important for this conversation. The physical has a corresponding energy, mentally, emotionally, and spiritually. And this is, I think, just, it's important because it allows you to look beyond the physical and see a much more expansive perspective of an interconnected reality of everything, right? Especially if thoughts and emotions extend beyond the body, which is now also a science that many scientists are pioneering right now. Dr. Rupert Sheldrake is a particularly interesting scientist who has done experiments that demonstrate that thoughts and emotions, he calls it morphogenetic field theory, that they extend beyond the body. They are all kind of, we're all interconnected in this wave, this field of thought and feeling. So many times, what happened? There we go. Many times we find ourselves having been put into situations, or find ourselves in situations where we may be completely confused. Why did something happen to us? It's very unclear. Maybe it's a negative thing. Why did this happen? Only to find out later, with a higher perspective, that it was actually in our highest good all along. One of the most meaningful and profound things someone ever said to me was, I was in a plant medicine ceremony, ayahuasca ceremony, actually at Rhythmia. And I was going through just a lot of stuff, just a lot of karmic history. And one of my friends who is a shaman came up to me, and he's just like, as hard as this is right now, one day you'll be grateful that it happened. And we talked for a while about it, but that really stuck with me for a really long time and gave me a lot of, it actually really compelled me into that reality, right? Because imagination lays the tracks for the reality trains. And by the time that experience, that ceremony was over, I was in a more grateful state, despite how hard and difficult all of that stuff was in the past. So in order to see the collective picture, we have to be able to look at the whole story, like the story of humanity, the story of our lives, the story of our culture, and see them, how they interact with each other, right? The story of you, your family members, your people in your lives, and then story of how countries emerged, and just the bigger picture for us as a species. And a holographic collective experience, if reality is a giant hologram, then we have to ask, well, what is the new Earth? What does it mean to all of us? How do we bring those collective ideas together and imagine something new? It can mean something unique to everyone, but most interpretations usually speak very simply, at the very least, to a better world for everyone, right? As we looked at, there's these pictures of all these different things, different possibilities, different, whether it's ocean cities or just a little more connected with nature, spacefaring, what have you, right? But the bottom line is maybe none of those things really matter in contrast to the perspective of, well, is life better for everyone, right? Creating this world begins with each of us evolving our own consciousness, and the collective consciousness also raising in awareness to the bigger picture. So let's sit with that for a moment as well. Like, we each have to evolve. We've talked about this quite a lot. We each have to do that work internally and externally, right? Pioneering a new level of awareness. But as we do that individually, we find collective consciousness also raises in awareness with this bigger picture that we're all striving towards. And sometimes we don't even necessarily have to know the bigger picture. We just know that we're growing. And as a species, we all evolve. And I think the beautiful thing here is that, not everyone has to be on board with this whole idea of ocean cities or spacefaring and this and that. And maybe it's an inevitability regardless as technology improves. But as that happens, us as a species naturally evolves too. And so, just kind of speaking to this here, right, is imagining this new Earth. It relates both individually and collectively. For the collective imagination is even more powerful than the individual. And that's a beautiful thing too. And I think, like, through just speaking of through entertainment and through media, there is a lot of suffering and chaos and stuff that is like this, that is purported through the news and through entertainment and through the media and everything like this. But at the same time, there's also a great deal of new positive imagination that is pioneered collectively by entertainment. And you can speak very briefly to, or I'll speak very briefly to, like Marvel movies, for example, very, very just massive industry and very, very large audience here. And Doctor Strange pioneered, really gave the idea into the imagination of astral projection and concepts like this to so many people who had never heard of it before. Not that Doctor Strange invented astral projection, obviously, but the point being that so many more people now are aware of the concept than ever would have been before, thanks to that film. And we can look at that even with the depictions of the quantum realm in Ant-Man, and not to stay on Marvel movies for too long, but the point being that, like, as we get a greater expression collectively, individually, and everywhere in between of better, brighter, more beautiful futures and higher understandings of reality, we collectively all kind of wake up and evolve and step into something new. The challenge is right now collectively we are imagining a lot of suffering on the other side. You flip on the news and bad news sells. That's just sort of a thing. There's actually a whole like learning how to write content. If you actually just do some research on how to write viral content, is the emotions that go the most viral, the number one emotion that goes the most viral is actually anger. So it kind of makes sense. Yeah, you put out something that makes a lot of people angry, and that's the thing that's gonna go viral the most. And it's laughter and humor is, I believe, it's number 2. So that's just it's where our consciousness is at right now. We have to be very real and authentically acknowledging of that if we have any desire or wish to transcend beyond it. And just as with our individual lives, there can be unexpected turmoil that shakes and shifts the entire world, and COVID is a really good example of this. So speaking to the laws, right? Like, one of the first things, the laws of the universe, laws of creation, laws of the new earth, one of the first things that people will say when imagining the new earth is that there will be no laws, right? It was a lawless society. Everyone will just be living from their hearts. It'll be beautiful. Why do we need laws, right? But with the holographic principle in mind, what are the laws? What are laws in general, right? We have to understand that laws are are basically the idea of the rules of the game, right? Like the laws of physics, if you will, very applicable to the third dimension as we currently understand them. And these are things that, if followed, some of the things seem to be mandatory to be followed, right? It's very difficult to escape the law of gravity as we understand it currently. This may be subject to change in the future. But they are things that, if followed, create a smoother shared experience. And things that, if are not followed, there are consequences. Now, I'm gonna jump down here for a moment too, to just outline and say very briefly, there is a difference between God's law and man's law. And this is where we find the disconnect between sort of the universal laws and the laws of there's stop signs and you better obey the law, when you're driving or whatever. Don't kill people. Well, that's probably a good universal law too. But the point being, in the Emerald Tablets in the Hermetica, Thoth tells us that the all is law. Like, law is built into the fabric of reality, and that cosmic laws are fundamental to all of creation from the mind of God. In fact, actually, that's a very brief but potent tangent, is that as we're looking at the whole concept of what if the entire universe is a big magical super simulation, then this actually traces back. This idea is not new by any stretch, because you go back 2,000 to 4,000 years ago, and sometime in between there, you go to the ancient Greeks and their Hermetic texts, but those also relate to the ancient Egyptian texts from thousands of years prior. What they describe so long ago is that all of this, everything in the universe, is all just a thought in the mind of God. And that all is mind because all exists within the mind of God, and that we are creating reality along with the rest of the forces of the universe and the mind of creation through this kind of reality sandbox game. And we must learn to acknowledge that there are certain principles at play within this holographic mind of God game. So it's also important to know that perhaps in some dimensions, laws work or at least appear differently, such as the quantum and the relative, right? Like, we don't currently understand scientifically how the quantum field, the quantum reality, which is, deeply, incredibly, super tiny, beyond which it's easily describable, and the relative or the standard model of physics, which is like, our bodies and gravity and this and that, like at a certain level, I believe it's the first hydrogen molecule is the point at which the laws of physics will either start or break down. Like bigger than a hydrogen molecule and smaller than a hydrogen molecule is where particles behave differently, right? But we also have that as above, so below. The thing is, we just don't know how those things translate from one reality into another. Perhaps they're connected, but they appear differently. But when you abide by a set of laws, you come into resonance with that system. So it's important to look at and I think understand and identify that the new earth, well, the earth that we're creating, which is new to us in this lifetime and as old as the universe itself in beyond ourselves, has particular laws as well. And so let's just look at what those are specifically. This is drawing from these ones specifically are drawing from the 7 Hermetic principles. And we have as above, so below, which we've talked about. And awareness of frequency, vibration of energy. It begins with, and actually that also comes from Nikola Tesla, who basically, described that, look, if you want to become a master of the universe, it's very simple. Just be aware that everything moves through frequency, vibration, and energy. When you come at life from that state, and looking at life from that, physical objects cease to be physical. You recognize that things are moving, and there's probably a relationship to this. And forgive me, I bring up like plant medicine a lot because it's been such a powerful healer and teacher in my life. But it might be one of those reasons why whenever you seem to take a plant medicine, everything seems to move and merge together. It stops being like physical objects, like the floor and the wall becomes floor wall, and they're moving. It's such an interesting experience. So with that in mind, here are the 7 Hermetic principles. The first being mentalism. All exists within the mind of God, and that it is through our own minds that we can become masters of reality. Then you have correspondence. Everything is connected and correlates with everything else, right? Nothing is separate. We have this preconceived notion that, I am me and you are you, and we're all disconnected in this world. And that's sort of this preconceived notion that we've been operating by for probably thousands of years, right? And that country, they're bad, and these guys are good, and we're going to go to war and this and that. But it's like, no, we're all one. We're all just like, we're all bits of awareness within this cosmic soup of vibrating energy that ultimately there is no separation. There is no disconnection here. Vibration is the next law, and that just basically simply says everything is vibrating and in motion. And following up with that is that there is a natural polarizing flow to the motion of creation. And in that polarity, like these 3 go together very well, right? Everything is moving. The movements have a polarity of like 2 extremes that they move between, and there's a rhythm between there. And that's very simple when you look at, even the basis of sound waves and color and color theory and all this stuff. It's like red has very long wavelengths or very extended wavelengths. And then violet has very short, fast wavelengths, right? And so this applies to sound, this applies to color, and it probably applies to the particles that are vibrating our bodies into existence and everything physical, right? So there is a natural polarizing rhythm to nature, to reality. And then the last 2 here, we have cause and effect. Every cause has an effect. Every effect has a cause. To the point at which, like, your in-breath leads to an out-breath, and so on and so forth forever, until you stop breathing, that is. And then also, like, us, having this New Earth Expo that we're having right now will lead to it. Like, it was an effect that became a cause that will affect everybody who watches it and go on and so forth to create more shifts and changes in the world and in life. And the final principle in the Hermetic laws is gender. And that is that there is a natural masculine and feminine energy or energies at play in all things. And understanding the nature of gender beyond the, male body, female body kind of thing, is that they're two different ways of energy moving, essentially. Is that one is sharp, pointed, and dynamic, and then the other is sort of a voluptuous, wavy, expansive, receptive in its nature. And that is a very large conversation in and of itself. So I'll probably just leave that there for right now. But there's spirit science episodes on masculine and feminine energies for anybody who wants to go deeper and you haven't seen it. So I'm coming close to the end here. We've got 10 more minutes. Let's see. Now, creating a new reality. A couple more slides too. Yeah, we're coming along just fine. Creating a new reality begins by confirming and growing to understand the workings of the cosmos on a higher level, beyond the limits of what human law has established, right? We have to recognize the God's law, right? These cosmic laws, and it might also be valuable to look at, like what ancient quote unquote laws existed. We have, of course, you have the 10 Commandments, which is very biblical, but the 10 Commandments seem to have come from the 42 laws of Ma'at, which was an ancient Egyptian philosophy of sort of these like laws by which to live your life by. And many of them sort of were, living in accordance with this vibrational understanding of reality, and had some very practical things as well, like don't steal grain. because grain was currency back in the day, so you don't want to steal it. So it would be very valuable for a collective exploration of what the highest ideals are, both looking at more on like a laws of the physics, laws of the universe sort of thing, and how we can create something practical and tangible for us to operate by as well. In order to do this, it requires openness and humility, right? It requires emptying our cups in order to perceive and receive access to the higher laws, the higher wisdom, a more cosmic understanding, and how to live in accordance with those principles. As we established living in accordance with God's law, we can bring the awareness of these laws and harmonious ways of living into the world we have now and facilitate the shift in consciousness, and that moves us into a new earth. Some major changes also may be imposed on us. Now, we mentioned this a little bit before, but some major changes may be imposed on us by society or our environment as well. And we must learn to change and flow within ourselves and become instruments of change and service to the world. Oh, hi, kitty. I don't know if you can hear meowing in the background, but my little scruffy kitty friend just came to say hi. Hey, I'm giving a workshop right now. All right, thanks. So this is really important because as we're talking about, life, death, life cycles, is like some things are going to die. Some aspects of society are going to die. And it can be very challenging. But if we center ourselves in the heart, center ourselves with a higher awareness, understand that change is a universal constant, and we can either change with the universe, change with reality, become instruments of change and instruments of service, then we can actively create a much more beautiful reality as a result of these changes, instead of just holding on really tight and watching everything just dwindle and fall apart. Life is in transition. Returning to the core concept of life, death, life cycles, right? Like reality is currently in massive transition, or at least our reality. Our old systems are dying. And as things change, it can be frightening to watch as old stabilities break down. Things that you relied on so much are no longer available to you. People are losing their jobs in mass due to COVID. This is one really good example, right? And it looks like that may continue for a while. Many jobs will also potentially be replaced by machines. We're already seeing this very clearly by, you go to a supermarket and yes, you can go to a checkout now, but there's also usually 6 to 10 self-serve machines, and you can just go and scan your items, pay for the thing, and you're gone. And that's going to put people, checkout clerks, out of business. Another technology that's rapidly emerging is autonomous electric vehicles. Now, we're not quite there yet. That'll probably be within 5 to 10 years, I would say, having vehicles basically just replace taxis, where you just get into the car, press where you want to go, and it takes you there. And it costs a fraction of what it would cost for a taxi, because you don't have to pay any person to do it. It's just like a machine that's been programmed, and it just drives and takes care of you, right? And so that's going to put a lot of shopping clerks and grocery clerks, as well as taxi drivers, out of business. And that is a thing that's going to continue to happen to a lot of different industries. And that's scary to a lot of people, right? People who relied on those jobs or those industries to make a living are going to be out of work. And what are they going to do with their times, right? And this is where we really have to cultivate that whole imagination, laying the tracks for the reality train to follow. It's like, you are a limitless, powerful, beautiful soul who can create life however it is that you want to. Why settle for a job that is less than, so fulfilling for you? If you could do something so much greater, you can add so much more value to the world. All that is requiring is your complete participation in that, right? So this is like, now more than ever, we must exercise our imagination and look for and create opportunities to create meaningful change in the world, to create service to the world, to each other, to society. Death is the road to awe, right? Quoting The Fountain again. Such a beautiful movie. Highly recommend watching it. It creates the space for a new way of life. What's coming is going. And this too shall pass. All of the struggles and suffering that we're existing within will pass into a new, higher reality. And we can either watch as it happens, or we can engage and be that change that we want to see. So empower yourself with wisdom and knowledge and implement it into your own life today, right? Really be the change you wish to see in the world. So we're coming right here to the very end now, and I would like to end by asking you a question and saying, what is your calling? Imagining a 5D society is in part a spiritual practice, one that takes full participation to realize. We are called to look at our lives and ask where we can be of service to the greater collective. Perhaps it's through volunteering, spending time with others, engaging with new material or spiritual practice, or starting a spiritual entrepreneurial venture, something that's deeply resonant to your heart that you want to create and bring to the world. And you are invited to go within, to find your calling and take action in that direction. And let us see this new earth into reality. Thank you so very much. Be blessed.
Hey, that was amazing. Thank you so much, Jordan. That was
Thank
beautiful.
you.
You must have had a good time putting all that together. I've heard many of these concepts that you've talked about before in some of your videos, but there was some new material too, wasn't there?
It's always changing.
Right. Well, thanks again. It's such a pleasure to have you. And we look forward to seeing all that spirit science has to offer in the future. I was posting lots of things about all of your classes and all of that in the chat during your talk. So people will have lots of opportunity to learn lots more about you and see all that you're up to.
Awesome. Thank you so much.
Yeah, thank you.
Be blessed. Thank you, everyone, for tuning in, and please enjoy the rest of the expo.
All right, that was fantastic. I'm so pleased that went so well. That was our first ever keynote talk, and Jordan is amazing, right? And really, what he's doing, he was talking about what kind of action that we can take to make our world better. And he's definitely doing some amazing things to make the world better. And many of us, and I saw even in the chat, many of you were saying things like, hey, I watched his video when I was younger. I watched this and I learned so much from him. So, we were very honored to have him today.